Welcome to the Catholic History Show. Today, we're going to talk about the Battle of Malplaquet. Hope you enjoy. So recently, I finished reading the Battle of Malplaquet by Malbrough, which you can get on Amazon for like $6. It was written in the early 1900s. But as an American, I did not ever really study the War of Spanish Succession. So the War of Spanish Succession really gets kicked off in 1701 when, as the name suggests, the throne of Spain is empty. So we need a successor. Well, the main one, or the legitimate heir to the throne of Spain, was the grandson of Louis XIV, King of France. Now, most people know of Louis XIV. He's the guy with Versailles and the Hall of Mirrors and all the parties and all that stuff. Also, he's responsible for the 30 Years' War in France, which we'll talk about in another video, and almost takes over the entirety of Europe. He's a larger-than-life personality, and he's a very powerful monarch in the post-medieval age. So this rubs a lot of the Protestants the wrong way. Why? Because Louis XIV is a notorious Catholic. He is very pro-Catholic, very pro-James II of England, who's the Catholic monarch who the Protestants kick off the throne in England. And the Protestants don't like this idea of more consolidation of power, Catholic power, under one monarch, Louis XIV. So they go to the Habsburgs, and the Habsburgs are running Austria, or the Holy Roman Empire, and they decide to push for their own heir. Well, of course, Louis XIV doesn't like this, so it kicks off a new war, i.e. the War of Spanish Succession, which begins really in 1701, 1702, and begins with the Battle of Blenheim, which is a famous battle, which we'll talk about hopefully in another video. But the War of Spanish Succession ends with the Battle of Malplaquet. And as I said in the very beginning of this video, it's important for the United States of America as well as for Catholic Europe, because the Battle of Malplaquet, while it is a French defeat, saves the remnant of Christendom for another 80 years. Alright, so you may be wondering how a French defeat at the Battle of Malplaquet in 1709 could save Catholic France. And I think the best way of understanding this is from a quote by Malbrough in his book on the Battle of Waterloo. Malbrough says, quote, "It must continually be insisted upon in military history that general actions, however decisive, are but the functions of campaigns, and that campaigns in their turn are but the functions of the political energies of the governments whose armies are engaged. The object of a campaign is invariably a political object, and all its military effort is, or should be, subsidiary to the political object. The prime military object of a general is to annihilate the armed force of his opponents. He may do this by breaking up their organization and dispersing them, or by compelling the surrender of their arms. He may achieve success in this purely military object in any degree, but if, as an end and consequence of his military success, the political object be not achieved, then the campaign has failed." End quotation. Okay, so what Belloc is saying here is that winning a battle, that's great. But if you lose the campaign, winning the battle really doesn't mean anything. Winning a campaign is great. But if winning the campaign does not ensure the success of your political object, then it doesn't really matter if you won the campaign. And the Battle of Malplaquet is actually one of the great examples of that principle, because the British, really the British and the Dutch, they beat the French in virtually every battle in the War of Spanish Succession. They win every campaign, and yet effectively they lose the war. Why? Because after the war ends at the Battle of Malplaquet on September 11th, 1709, the King of Spain is still the grandson of Louis XIV, and Louis XIV himself is still on the throne of France. So before we get to the Battle of Malplaquet, I think we need to back up a little bit. Prior to the battle, Louis XIV attempts to sue for peace with they call it the Grand Alliance, but it's really the British and the Dutch. Louis XIV wants to sue for peace because he's lost virtually every battle in this war thus far. He is looking for an easy way out of this war. But the British and the Dutch make a pretty terrible mistake. They overplay their hand. They want Louis XIV to go to war with his grandson, the son of Spain. They want Louis XIV to invade Spain and depose his own grandson. And then, oh, by the way, after that, they're going to rip apart France. So Louis XIV's like, I don't have anything to lose. I might as well just let them invade France and do what they're going to do anyways. I'm not going to go and try and take my grandson off the throne of Spain. So that failed peace attempt predicates the Battle of Malplaquet. So the British and the Dutch now have to go and invade France. I just want to make sure this point is very clear. And that is, if the French lose this war, the British and the Dutch are going to try and separate France. They're going to try to rip it apart into pieces and cause basically civil war to take place in France. They are sick and tired of a Catholic country as strong as France dictating terms to the European continent. If the French lose this war, the remnant of Christendom that lasts for about another 80 years until the French Revolution is gone, which means the monarchies of France and Spain are no longer strong nations, which means that in 1777, after the Battle of Saratoga, the United States of America is in need of allies. There is no France and Spain to support them. This is why the Battle of Malplaquet and the French political victory at the Battle of Malplaquet determines that the United States of America has a chance of existing when they go to war with Great Britain. So for Americans, the War of Spanish Succession is of the highest importance because if the British and the Dutch get their way, there's no one to come to the aid of the Americans in the 1770s. All right, so let's finally get to the Battle of Malplaquet. The players involved here, like I said, are the Grand Alliance, the British and the Dutch. They're led by the Duke of Marlborough, also known as John Churchill, and Prince Eugene of Savoy, two brilliant military masterminds. Churchill, the English general, he masterminds basically every victory of the Grand Alliance. The Battle of Blenheim. In fact, after the Battle of Blenheim, his wife is good friends with Queen Anne of England. This is kind of a side note. And she convinces Queen Anne to give him a giant estate. So she does. And they name the big manor house, which is this giant house, Blenheim Palace. And you can actually go see it today. There's a huge portrait of John Churchill in there. And it's pretty cool. So if you're in England and you want to go see a big fancy house, I'd highly recommend going to the Duke of Marlborough's house. Any event. So he wins this victory at Blenheim. He becomes like a sensational star. And he runs multiple successful campaigns throughout this war for the next 8 years. The Prince Eugene of Savoy is a great subordinate to Churchill. Very reliable, and he's also very helpful when Marlborough is coming up with his plans of attack. All right, so now let's get to the French side. You have the main general for the French is General Villars, and his job is to basically protect the Belgian frontier, or where France and Belgium come together, from an invasion of the English and the Dutch. Now, France at this time knows that this is the end game, okay? So the British and the Dutch are going to invade. They're going to try and take Paris, and they're going to try to depose their king. So at this moment, there's a massive amount of unity taking place in France. Now, at the end of Louis XIV's reign, which this is, there isn't a lot of resources left in France. They've used up a lot of their resources, mainly in terms of manpower. Louis XIV has spent virtually his entire reign at war with somebody in Europe. So really, they're on their last gas here. And so Villars is put in charge of the French army on the Belgian frontier. However, Marshal Boufflers comes out of retirement, and he's this major national hero, and hopefully I get to talk about him in another video, in another campaign that he is, because he's a fascinating character. In any event, he comes out of retirement to really kind of inspire the French soldiers and people to get behind this movement. So that brings us to the actual Battle of Malplaquet. Right prior to this battle, there's this small town called Tournai, which is right here on the Belgian frontier. And one thing that the French are very well known for is their fortifications, especially at their time. Their engineering is far superior when it comes to military fortifications than everybody else in Europe. They are brilliant masterminds when it comes to this. So Tournai is this small town, but it's really well fortified. And the Grand Alliance, the English and the Dutch, they need to take Tournai before they can actually come and attack the main French army. The problem is it takes them several weeks to actually take Tournai, and they lose thousands of men. It's a terrible, bloody affair, but the French hold out long enough for the reinforcements and General Boufflers to show up on the battlefield. That would be Malplaquet. Okay, so Malplaquet is actually the name of a small hamlet, a little village on this Belgian frontier. And it's actually flanked by two forests. So the French realize that they can more effectively use their smaller force if they anchor each side of their line in the two forests. Really what their line looks like is two triangles with a straight line connecting those two triangles. And those two triangles are made up of major earthworks and fortifications. Now, like I said, the Battle of Tournai takes the English long enough, it gives the French enough time to actually really build up these fortifications. So when the English show up, they're looking at French soldiers who are well dug in and well supplied, ready for this battle. So the Duke of Marlborough's plan is to attack with his right flank. He's going to attack the left fortification of the French. 30 minutes later, he's going to send the Prince of Orange with a Dutch force to attack on the left flank of the English, or the right fortification of the French. And the reason he's going to do this is he's basically trying to pin the French in place so they can't reinforce each other's side. So if he just attacked with the right side, what the French would do is they take men from the left side to try and reinforce. But if there's two attacks going on at the same time, you can't do that, or you can't as easily do that in the midst of the battle. So it's actually a very brilliant plan. Now, after they have successfully basically pushed the French out of these fortifications, what he's going to have them do is then attack the center of the line with his cavalry. He had his forces in line ready to go at about 4 a.m. However, there was a major fog in place. So they actually have to wait till about 7 o'clock in the morning before the fog lifts, and they can actually start this battle. So it starts off really well. They attack. However, the French left side gives more of a defense than Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, actually thought that they would. In fact, there's multiple accounts of him actually getting into the battle himself, rallying the guys up, trying to attack again and again. But they're fighting through a forest. It's hard to fight in a forest. There's trees everywhere. There's brush everywhere. You're getting caught up. Your lines get tangled up. And then put on top of that, these French earthworks. It's not easy going for these British soldiers. So then, on the left, the Prince of Orange gets underway. He begins his attack on the right side of the French line. And the thing that really saved all of Christendom was this tiny little group of trees in the middle of the battlefield. Not part of either forest, but there's little copse of trees in the middle of the forest. And what happens is the Dutch lines get separated. They get cut in two because they're trying to go around this little group of trees. And by doing that, the French have the ability to counterattack the Prince of Orange forces and basically annihilate them. So the Prince of Orange, his forces fall back. Now, a lot of historians have blamed the Prince of Orange for this, but as Belloc points out, that's not a good, you don't have a really good case. The Prince of Orange does basically everything he can to rally his troops and get them back in line. And in fact, when the Duke of Marlborough, Churchill, figures out that there's a problem on the left, he leaves his right side, his right attack, and comes back over to his left and rallies the troops and gets them ready to make another counterattack, which really saved the English and the Dutch at the Battle of Malplaquet. So he gets them ready to attack again, but this time what he's going to do is he's going to attack into the center, because by this point, the French left is starting to get pushed back. The heavy attacks that started in the very beginning of the morning, this is afternoon at this point. They are bloodied, they are bludgeoned, they're getting pushed out of the forest. So Churchill gets his guys ready on the English and Dutch left. And once the French are pushed far enough back, they force the center of the French line. Problem is, this would have been a complete disaster for the French army, except the French had fought so hard on their left-hand fortifications that the English and Dutch soldiers on that side could not follow up the attack on the French left. They couldn't turn the French left flank. So the French were able to fall back slowly and regroup and continue fighting. At this point, Villars, the French general, sends the cavalry in, and they come in and they get caught up with the English. It's evening time by this time. Everyone is completely exhausted. There's thousands upon thousands of dead on the field. They've been fighting in forests all day. They're hungry. They're exhausted. And basically, the end of the Battle of Malplaquet is cavalry charges coming from either side, from the French and the English. And so it's the Battle of Malplaquet really is one of the hardest fought battles in the War of Spanish Succession. The French are holding on for dear life, and the end of it is this kind of cavalry fray between the two. Basically, everybody's just waiting for nightfall so that they can lay down, regroup, go to sleep, get something to eat, and wake up the next day. But the next day, when the English and Dutch realize that all they've gained really is a couple hundred yards of land, and that the French army still exists and is ready to fall back to further entrenchments and fortifications, becomes pretty clear that this is going to be a really hard-fought end of this war. And what essentially happens is the English people are just sick of it. They're done with this. They've been at war with France for so long now. They spent so much treasure and time for the King of Spain. And by the early 1700s, Spain's wealth was waning. Their economy was kind of slowing down, and they weren't as much of a threat to England. And so the English people effectively say, all right, enough of this. We'll come up with a treaty. Basically, France is going to keep its boundaries. Louis XIV is going to stay on the throne. And the grandson of Louis XIV is going to stay on the throne of Spain. So this is a perfect example, as Belloc pointed out, that where you can win every battle, you can win every campaign. But if you don't get the political object that you're set out for, it doesn't really matter. France essentially wins the War of Spanish Succession. And the key for us Catholics is that France remains a Catholic nation for another 80 years. Because in 80 years, of course, they're going to basically just reject Catholicism outright. They're no longer going to be a Catholic country, and they're going to turn themselves over to chaos in the French Revolution. But those 80 years are key to keeping the remnant of Christendom alive so that it could continue later. All right, so that's the Battle of Malplaquet. Saved Christendom, for what was left of it, for another 80 years, and helped make sure that the French and Spanish were there to help the Americans when they needed it in the War of American Independence. So, till next time, we hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy it and you'd like to see more of the videos, please subscribe to the channel, the Catholic History channel, and like it, leave a comment. If there's something you'd like me to talk about, put it in the comment section and I'll take a look at it. All right. God bless.